All right, today we're going to talk about our surface planer. We have a 25-inch surface planer. The reason it is called a 25-inch surface planer is because it has a 25-inch cut capacity. I want to take a second to talk about how this machine works and what it does for us. The joiner, we talked about, flattens one surface. The planer is going to take the opposite face and get it parallel and flat to our original jointed face. If you come down here, we'll take a look inside the planer and talk about the different parts. The cutter head is located above your board. Okay, so when I send my board through, okay, it's going to come in contact with the cutter head on the top surface of my board. We have a series of rollers here. This machine feeds the board through on its own. So these are segmented in-feed rollers that will push the board into the cutter head, which will then continue to be pushed through to an out-feed roller that will push the board out the backside of the machine. On the table, we have table rollers that are used to just reduce the amount of friction it takes to send the board through. All of the work happens up top with those segmented in-feed rollers as it pushes the board through the planer. Now, the planer, in order for it to work appropriately, we have to have that flat surface. So that jointed face or flat surface of our board is going to go down on the table, and then the opposite face is going to get cleaned up by the cutter head on top. So remember, we talked about face joining on the joiner. If you run into a situation where you have a really warped board like this, we need to face joint that first. Okay? If we don't, what's going to happen is the pressure from the rollers is going to squish the board flat, and when it comes out the other side of the machine, it's just going to pop back into that original position. So we need to use the joiner to make sure we have flat stock before we come over to the planer. Relatively safe machine, but there are a couple things that we need to be aware of. Specifically where we want to stand. We talk about the kickback area and all of our equipment. The kickback area on the planer is basically the rest of the shop. If something gets caught inside of here and we plane a board that's too short or we don't have the setting on the height correct, it could launch a board out of the planer in that direction, which is where all of our workbenches and things are. So when we operate this, we want to stand to the side. Either stand over here and operate it, or stand over here. Okay? Whatever is going on at the table, we want to be out of the way of it. Another thing we want to worry about is our fingers, where we place our fingers. When you put a board into the planer, okay, for the first couple passes, we talked about those segmented in-feed rollers that are up here. What they do is they grab the front corner of the board and they can lift this up a little bit as it pulls it in. As it goes in, it then gets pushed down onto the table. If I have my fingers underneath here, okay, this is going to smash down on my fingers and it's going to continue to pull this board through, okay, grinding my fingers into a fine paste. Another thing we want to worry about or think about is the length of our board. Remember, we have an in-feed roller and then we have an out-feed roller back here. We cannot plane anything less than 12 inches long. The reason is, if I take this board and send it through, the in-feed rollers are going to push it past the cutter, but by the time the in-feed rollers are done feeding it in, the out-feed rollers have not got hold of it yet. So this thing is going to basically be sitting by itself underneath the cutter head. Okay, that is a prime opportunity for a kickback to happen. So 12-inch minimum on the length of board we can plane. Thickness-wise, okay, we can go up to 8+ inches on this machine, but we can't go any thinner than 3/8 of an inch. The reason is 3/8 of an inch gets this tabletop way too close to the cutter head, and we don't want to run the risk of something getting stuck in there or running the table into the cutter head and causing damage to the cutter or the table. Another couple things we want to worry about is feed direction on our boards. Whenever we plane a board, okay, we have to feed with the grain. Okay, this board is going to run this way. We cannot run boards sideways. Most of the time they're going to be too short, but the other reason is as you cut, okay, that cutter is coming around on top of the board. If we feed across the grain, the cutter is going to want to dig in to the grain and tear material out as opposed to shave material off of the top. So make sure we're feeding with the grain. Okay, that means we cannot plane plywood, we can't plane hardboard or MDF or anything like that. We can only plane solid stock with this particular machine. The other thing, and finally the last thing we want to think about, is retrieving the board on the opposite side. Okay? Remember, this machine is going to feed the board through itself, so you're going to get it started, the machine is going to send it through. When you come around to the back side here, as the board is being fed out to you, we want to make sure we're there to catch it and keep it from falling on the floor. Okay? We don't want it to hit the floor, and we also, on longer boards, don't want them to tip, okay, because they're lengthy, and they could tip and put the back end up into the cutter head, okay, causing it to chew up the back side of your board. So make sure, once you get it started, come around here and retrieve the board from the planer. All right, let's talk about how we're going to operate this machine. There are two different methods. The first one we're going to talk about is using presets. We are able to program a series of dimensions into the planer, and using presets we can get the table in relationship to the cutter head to a specific dimension. When we walk up to this machine, we have to have a couple of things in mind. Okay? First thing we need to know is how thick our board is currently. All right? We can only take 1/16 of an inch off at a time, so I need to know accurately what this board is to begin with so that I can set the machine accordingly. So I'm going to measure at a couple of different locations because I want the thickest portion. So there I'm at 15/16, there I'm at 7/8. That's 15/16 and 7/8. So the thickest part of my board here is 15/16 of an inch, which means my first pass is 1/16 of an inch less than that dimension. Okay? 1/16 less than 15/16 is 7/8. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at my preset section, and I'm going to find 7/8. Okay, there's 7/8. 7/8 is preset number 7. So on the keypad, I'm going to type in 7, enter, start, and it will move the table automatically to that dimension. This now is set to take 1/16 of an inch off the surface of this board. Now, we've talked a lot about reference surfaces when we were going over the joiner. Here is where one of those reference surfaces is going to come into play. We need our reference surface, okay, the surface we jointed on the planer, or excuse me, the jointer, or the surface that's already flat enough to begin with, okay, that we've marked up, is going to go down on the table. So that we have the flat table in contact with the flat surface so that the ensuing cut on the top comes out nice and parallel. So once you have this set, you're ready to go ahead and turn the planer on. First thing you got to check is whether this is locked out. Okay, if it's not, I can hit start all day long and that will not turn on. You need to turn that knob slightly so that emergency stop pops out. Another thing we need to remember on this machine is you never ever run it without the vacuum on. So I've got my board prepped, I've measured, I've set my table height, okay, I've unlocked the machine, I'm going to turn the vacuum on. I'm going to send this through. I'm going to push the motor, the main motor button, place my board on the table, if I need to take more off, okay, I will continue through the presets until I get to the desired dimension. For example, if I were going to go down to 3/4 of an inch, My next preset would be 6, so I'd hit 6, start, send my board through. It would come out, I'd go down to 5, start, let the table move, send my board through. And I would continue in that fashion using the presets until I get to the desired dimension. The other method to go ahead and plane a board down and move the table up and down is with a hand wheel and a custom program. We only have custom programs for a few select dimensions. These are dimensions that you're going to run into very often. If we run into a situation where, let's say, we have to plane a board down to 5/8 of an inch, right? We're going to use a combination of adjusting the table with the hand wheel and typing in a custom program. I've measured this board in a couple of different locations, and it is currently at 3/4 of an inch, or 0.75 inches. What I want to do is get it down to 5/8. So me, because I'm a math wizard, I know that's 2 passes through the planer, taking a 1/16 off each time. But rather than sit here and type in custom numbers on the dial, I'm going to first use the hand wheel to get to my first setting, and then I'm going to do a custom setting on the control panel for my final pass. So to adjust the table with the hand wheel, you are going to push in and turn until it locks. Once it's pressed in, you can turn this up or down to a specific dimension. The LCD screen here will tell you where you're at. So I know that for my first pass, I want to be around 0.68. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to turn the machine on in a second here, send it through at 1 pass, and then I'm going to have you come over and I'm going to walk you through how to custom set a specific dimension. So we'll unlock the machine, we'll turn the vacuum on, fire up the motor, right now I'm at 11/16 and I know my last pass wants to be at 5/8. So following the directions printed here, I'm going to type in my 5/8 number. So it says press the program button. Then it says enter the measurement you want. 0.625, 0.625. Press the enter key, press start. Now the table is going to move to 0.625, which is our 5/8. This will be my final pass. So to reiterate, if we're going to use the hand wheel, we press in and turn until it engages, and then we can move the table up or down. You can see the display changing. Okay, the other way, okay, is to type in your custom measurement by pressing program, type in the dimension you want, press enter, press start, and the table will move automatically for you.